Tezos has some diehard fans, but in the last 2 years, interest in the blockchain has been hard-won, with many investors losing trust in the ecosystem. Just this year, the XTZ or Tez token has seen an increase in price of about 170%, which isn't bad for a coin that isn't generally hyped and sometimes even disregarded by many crypto journalists. In the same amount of time, the token has moved up in market cap to the 30th largest cryptocurrency. But there's a lot to go through when it comes to Tezos' history, a blockchain that has been admired, imitated, and even mocked. So stick with me through the end of this video so you can better determine if you should add XTZ to your investment strategy. So if you watch this channel often, you'll know that one of the ways that I determine whether a coin is worth your capital or not is by looking to the founders. XTZ has been around for a while. And if you know the history of this blockchain, then you've got a pretty good idea of what the founders are capable of and what they've been through. Kathleen and Arthur Brightman are the founders of Tezos, and they're fondly referred to as the first married couple in crypto during the ICO craze of 2017. In Tezos' early days, the Brightmans were already seen as public intellectuals in the crypto space. Their careers in finance and computer science helped the public trust them and their blockchain innovations. Arthur had been a quantitative analyst at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, while Kathleen had experience at the hedge fund Bridgewater Associates and at the global consulting firm Accenture. However, their professional credentials were just half the story, if that. Wired magazine did an awesome report on their journey together, including how they met at Cornell and where the idea came to build Tezos. This includes the story of how one of their early partners set off a wild series of events that ultimately led to a $25 million lawsuit. So the couple met, got married, and eventually grew to share a love of crypto, closely following the developments of Bitcoin and Ethereum. So Arthur and Kathleen were some of the first to point out the flaws in the proof of work model in both first-gen crypto, being Bitcoin, and second-gen players like Ethereum. Specifically, their criticism was how governance issues on these earlier blockchains would make it difficult for the community to agree on how to change or upgrade projects. The Brightmans saw that forks in a network, as have happened on Ethereum and Bitcoin, would be detrimental to the idea of a trustworthy cryptocurrency. So picture living in an apartment building, and that apartment building's maintenance and management is the responsibility of a central group. A fork in a blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum is like that central group in this apartment building, splitting the building right down the middle, each half having to abide by the decisions of their own side. And then in the future, each time the administrators can't come to another consensus, new splits are created and the building is further divided. This would be terrible for the homeowners living in our imaginary building. The prices of homes would become extremely volatile and there would be far fewer resources for each segment within the building. And the whole time, the residents would have little to no say in how their investment, being an apartment in this case, is affected by all of these changes. And this is effectively what happens when a cryptocurrency splits. Bitcoin obviously survived its hard forks, but for viable cryptocurrencies of the future, stakeholders need decentralized governance. This way, they can vote on how their blockchain should evolve in the future and they can trust it long term. Tezos was born as one potential solution to this. The Brightmans took the concept of proof of stake and found a way to use this technology to let participants vote on upgrades to the Tezos blockchain and even vote on the way that votes are processed. This sounds simple by today's standards, but the math behind this innovation, which you can read about in their white paper, was groundbreaking at the time in many ways. Now, there hasn't been much hype around Tezos this year, which is possibly a reflection of the founders' values. It's worth pointing out that both Kathleen and Arthur Brightman have expressed reservations about the crypto hype machine, and they happen to be more enthusiastic about the functionality of their technology over the hype. The downside of this approach is the lack of marketing in Tezos. But because of key partnerships the blockchain has made with financial companies, NFT marketplaces, and corporations like Ubisoft and Red Bull, developers and investors have been curious as to what the future might hold here. So Tezos' proof of stake model, relatively low fees, and decentralized governance have become a breeding ground for experimental ideas. Now let's talk about what went wrong with Tezos. And with this, we have good news and we have bad news. The good news is that for all the trust issues investors have had in Tezos in the past, that $25 million settlement they reached last year has wiped the slate clean, restoring faith in the founders' vision for the ecosystem. The thing is, when Tezos had its ICO in July of 2017, it was record-breaking. At the time, there was actually plenty of hype around the XTZ token because of the problems with Ethereum that it was going to potentially solve. Blogs went nuts. The ICO actually raised $232 million in just 3 days and only kept gaining momentum after that. But two things kind of happened in parallel at this time. In the weeks that followed the ICO, the Brightmans and their other collaborators fell into a dispute about who was responsible for what, with some accounts of the story suggesting that one collaborator, a Johan Gievers, was self-dealing and leaving the founders completely in the dark on how and when the blockchain would be up and running. And while this was happening behind the scenes, Tezos' value was skyrocketing. By the time the lawsuits were filed, the company's assets shot above $700 million. People knew that there were problems in the leadership, but they kept on buying. The story ends with reporters piling onto the drama, stoking fear that Tezos was ultimately just a con and was seconds away from stealing it all. Hence the settlements. $16 million of the $25 million went directly to investors that simply wanted out. But all of this drama seems to be behind Tezos as they begin picking up steam again. The bad news is, in the time that it's taken Tezos to recover, other smart contract cryptocurrencies have stolen the spotlight. At one point in time, the question was, could this cryptocurrency eclipse even Ethereum? Many thought so for Tezos. But Ethereum continued being Ethereum, and Tezos was a no-show. Tezos very well could have taken third place in crypto exchange listings by now, but for reasons thoroughly discussed on this channel, Cardano has just had more public attention and now many more projects being built on its ecosystem. Once upon a time, Tezos would have been top of mind when you heard the words proof of stake. But this scandal, bad as it wasn't the only obstacle. The programming language that Arthur Brightman used was OCaml, and this is developed by the French government and some of their top universities. The problem is, this is a language that very few developers were familiar with. Even after Tezos did finally launch their blockchain a year after its ICO, it had an extra helping of trouble getting people to actually build on it and to use it. There wasn't enough users, there wasn't enough developers. Shortly after the launch, the founders left the management of their blockchain to other people. This way they could focus on other interests. It was a complete mess. And whenever crypto experts would refer to Tezos, they'd call it a ghost chain, a blockchain that exists, that works, but just doesn't seem to have any participants. But now let's talk about the future. Despite the shock of getting sued, the Brightmans are back in action at Tezos. What happens next in Tezos will be part of a redemptive arc, rather than a launch of something new and exciting, but it may just work out in their favor. Just this year, the network hit 10 million contract calls. That's people making transactions on the Tezos network. Now, Kathleen Brightman said in an interview that 5 million of those calls were from just this year. NFTs have also played a role. Several marketplaces for these assets have set up shop on Tezos. Most notably, Doja Cat, yeah, her, has sold an NFT through OneOf, which is built on the Tezos blockchain. This instantly gave Tezos a reputation for being an eco-friendly network used by the cat. The NFT sold for $188,000, by the way. The applications for Tezos network have only gone up since then. At the end of August, they announced partnerships with 3 Swiss firms, Incore Bank, Inacta, and Crypto Finance Group. They all announced that they would use Tezos to develop DAR1 tokens. The tokens would use smart contracts to comply with, quote, anti-money laundering rules and improve governance. Incore Bank has also launched staking services for the Tezos token. And then this news comes on the back of their recent network protocol upgrade, Granada, which finally introduced experimental DEX features. Users would now be able to stake their Tez token to earn more Tez through a feature called liquidity baking. This directly addresses one of Tezos' growing pains: the founders' once upon a time aversion to trendy DeFi projects. And this may be indicative to a complete change of mindset for the founders and their team. So things are looking great for Tezos, in my honest opinion. The rate of adoption that we're seeing for their technology and their smart contracts feels like a pipe dream compared to where they were at launch. It was once thought that Tezos would be slow with its network upgrades, a problem that comes with being fully decentralized, but the community of developers around the blockchain is quickly proving that wrong. Record high transaction figures are a good sign that Tezos isn't the ghost chain that people once loved to dismiss. But when Kathleen Brightman says that it'll be one of the top 5 cryptocurrencies that take 90% of the entire crypto market, it's still tough to say whether Tezos will be among them or not. We're looking at strong technology and growing support, but it's on the back of past drama and failures which create additional risks to the blockchain and for investors. So if they're able to pull this off, this will be the blockchain comeback of the decade, and investors will be rewarded handsomely. So that's going to do it. If you'd like to see my full Tezos research report, you'll want to join my Patreon. There you will also find my buy and sell alerts and a private community of investors. Spots are limited, so make sure you grab one while they're still available. I'd like to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.